So if you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so you can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app and go to Anchor FM to get started.
The following audio, brought to you by TSF Entertainment Podcast, may contain graphic descriptions of violence and or audio clips of violence or sexual explicit events. Listeners' discretion is advised.
What's going on, TSF Entertainment Podcast? This is RETROCG, and tonight I'm joined by my host, Miss REALLYBTV.
I'm your co-host, but okay.
Yes, you are my co-host. You're always my co-host.
What's up?
Well, tonight we're going to do something a little bit different than what we normally do on the podcast, and I think this is something that we should do a lot more of, especially centered around persons of color. Oftentimes we see that things that happen with people of color, whether it's disappearances or murders, they really don't get much spotlight put on those cases, and those cases rarely get solved.
Yeah, it's definitely a different level of focus when it comes to people of color, especially it seems like young women, it seems like.
Especially with young women. And tonight's case is probably at the very top of bizarre and strange. So tonight we're going to be talking about the disappearance of Miss Cleashindra Denise Hall. She was an 18-year-old student who disappeared in May 1994. And this is a very bizarre case, a very perplexing case, and at the same time, it's very frustrating. Even 27 years later, there's a certain level of frustration because I feel like this is a solvable case. This case could have very easily been solved.
I think it absolutely could have been solved very relatively quickly if the theory is correct. Yeah.
Well, a little background story or a little background details regarding the case. So Cleashindra Hall, which we'll refer to her as Cle'a, that was her nickname. She was an 18-year-old high school student. She was 2 weeks away from graduating. She's from Pine Bluff, Arkansas. And she was an honor student. She made good grades. She did what she was supposed to do as a student.
She had a full scholarship to college and all that.
I think they said that she was maybe 2 to 3 weeks away from doing an internship. She had aspirations on becoming a pediatric physician. So she was very career-minded and very focused on furthering her education and her goals in life. So CP, how did we get to this point? What happens with Cle'a?
Well, from what we read, she it was a Monday after, it was the weekend. It was Mother's Day, the Monday after Mother's Day, and she went to her part-time job. She worked for Dr. Larry Amos, who they keep referring to him as a doctor, but he ran a program that got grant money for at-home daycare. So I don't know if he was a medical doctor and that's just, or if it was like a PhD type doctor, but he's a doctor. And
from what I understand, this was a nonprofit organization.
Right, it's a nonprofit.
So he didn't run a primary physician or healthcare.
Right. It was a nonprofit, and he ran it out of his home. So he had a home office. And that's where she worked, in the evening. She did clerical work for him. And from, and I read and listened to a lot of podcasts. So it was a lot of information. But they said she'd been working there for about a year.
And from what I understand, she was recommended this job by a friend of hers or acquaintance.
Right. A friend, her name was Erica. We'll hear a little bit more about Erica. But she went there that day, and she had her driver's license, but she didn't drive. So she always either got a ride to and from work, or she would walk, which was she lived about 10 minutes away, walking distance from Dr. Amos. But they said that if she ever walked, she always had her brothers come and walk with her. So she never walked alone. So even when she did walk, she didn't do it by herself. But this particular day, her mom dropped her off.
Well,
And
it's important to note that her method of transportation to and from work was her mother. And as you said, the only times that her mother would not come and get her would be those times where her brother would come and walk her home. She's about 10 minutes away from her home to Dr. Larry Amos's home.
right. And so she that particular day she went to work, and at some point during her shift she did call back to the house to ask if
Well, let's press
anybody.
rewind on that just for a little bit, CP, because from what I understand of the situation, and there's been a lot of different versions of the story, but one of the more popular versions of the story states that her mother had picked her up from school that day around about 2:45 to take her to work, and when they arrived to the doctor's home, no one was home. And so at that point, they end up going home, and they received a call around maybe 4:45 that afternoon from the doctor's wife. Dr. Larry Amos was married, and the wife called and let them know that Clea can come to work. So I think at this point, she gets up and just goes to work. She doesn't take anything with her. She doesn't take any of her. I mean, we live in a different day and time than 1994. I mean, I grew up in 1994, so we had less attachments as we do in modern day times now. Ideally, none of us would leave the phone without. None of us will leave home without our cell phones or personal things like that. But it's important to note that she didn't take anything to work with her.
Well, I mean, I did find that interesting because I mean, and again, I grew up in a major city versus, maybe a smaller town, but I was just taught you never leave the house without any kind of ID. And I understand she was just going 10 minutes away and her mom was picking her up and dropping her off, but I did find that interesting that she didn't have any ID with her. She didn't have her purse with her wallet, nothing.
No
I just
money, no anything.
as a young lady, I've just never seen a young lady that just, I mean, a senior in high school that didn't pick up their purse. But I get it. I mean, it is what it is. But that did hit me as kind of curious that she just wouldn't feel like she needed to pick up anything. But again, I think that also goes to show how comfortable she was in just going to Dr. Amos's house, that it's just what she did. And I also think that when we get to later on, it shows that she had no intentions. At least when she left the house, I don't feel like she had any intention of going anywhere else.
But to work and back home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I just don't feel like she had the intention of doing anything else because she didn't pick anything else up. It was just like, all right, let's go to, let me go to work for a couple of hours and I'm coming right back home.
And some of the versions of the story that's being told is that she was a little irritated about having to go in. I think that she had planned on wanting to go in earlier. Maybe she wanted to pick up a couple extra hours.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
think
know if
that's what
this
she
was her
wanted. Yeah.
normal shift, but I mean, a 4-hour shift, 10 minutes up the road, she just jumps up and says, let me go get this over with. So I agree. I think that she didn't have any intentions on doing anything else after work but going back home.
Yeah, and that's one of the things. Again, I listened to so many podcasts and stuff on this in the last week or so, just getting the information. But that is one of the things that I read, was that she was trying to pick up some extra hours because she was actually going to do an internship in Boston for the summer before she started school, and so she was just trying to pick up as much, as many hours as she could to get as much money as she could. I might be all over the place, so let me go ahead and say this, but before I forget, Dr. Amos did have a reputation for being cheap, so he didn't pay a lot. And So, that may or may not be important, but I do know that that's something that I heard a couple of times that definitely had a reputation for being cheap. They even said that he would get work done on the house and then would complain so that he could get out of paying or get a bigger discount on the work. So, definitely wasn't giving out extra bonuses at the end of the week. But yeah, so
And the stories that have been told regarding the case, it seems that most of her responsibilities for Dr. Amos consisted of just light clerical duties, maybe some check writing, and some assisting with some of the grant writing. It was never really been publicly stated as to what Erica's responsibilities were as well. I'm assuming she shared in those clerical responsibilities
probably a little
along with
bit of the
Clea.
same. Yeah.
Yeah.
And now we'll say it again, again, we'll go back to this. I will say this, that, and, this was in one of the, articles, podcasts that she was curious about some of the checks that she wrote, that she was kind of curious about, that everything didn't seem like it was on the up and up, but kind of like one of those that's above my pay
Not
grade kind of
overly
thing.
concerned, but
Yeah, but kind of like,
conscientious of the
this
fact
seems
that the
kind of
doctor is coloring outside the lines.
right, and that might come in, that might come into play with some of these alternative theories that we'll get to later on. So anyway, she goes to work that night, or that day, I should say. And she called back. Her mother said around 8 o'clock, she called back to the house and she said that her brother picked up the line and her mom didn't say anything. And again, we have to get in our spaceship and go to 1994. And remember that this was before the days of cell phones and text messaging and all of that. And she said that her mom even said that they didn't even have caller ID at that point in time. So, she called back to the house to find out if anybody had called her. And, it's one of those things where it may or may not, you may or may not feel like that's, like, okay, well, was she looking for a phone call, or was she just teenage curiosity? Was anybody looking for me? But her
And you
brother
have to
told her
also think
no.
about, she's coming off the heels of I think she went to her prom.
Hmm.
And I think there was some type of ball she went to that Saturday night.
Hmm.
So there had been a
She
lot
had a
of
busy
things.
weekend. Yeah,
Yeah,
she
she
had
had
a
a busy
yeah,
weekend.
and
So
she was getting ready to go into graduation. I know, regardless, some things are universal. No matter where you went to high school, no matter what year you went to high school, some things are universal. Those last couple of weeks of school between prom and graduation is pretty much filler. At that point, you've graduated. You already know where you're going to college. You're kind of just going through the motions to get you to the end, and it's a lot going on. It's a lot of parties. It's a lot of it's a lot of
it's a lot
stuff
of
going
it's a
on.
time for celebration.
Yeah, it's
It's
just
time for
definitely a lot
celebration.
going on. So maybe there was some phone, she was waiting to hear back about some different things going on for that week. Maybe we're gonna get to that a little bit later on, but her mom said that she had, met a guy. They're very clear to make sure that he is not referred to as her boyfriend, but he was a friend she was interested in. And I found that to be curious that her mom was very clear to say he was not her boyfriend. So,
And I've heard so many different accounts as to the nature of their relationship.
mm-hmm.
In some accounts, he's referred to as a friend she met at church. In other accounts, he's slightly a little bit older than her. She may have had interest in him. He may have not had interest in her. So it's from what I understand and what I've read and the research I've done regarding this case, he's never really publicly spoken out about the nature of their relationship or the.
Which is curious, so we'll get to that. That's very curious to me, at least. That's very curious. But yeah, so maybe she was waiting to see if he had called her again. The days before cell phones, the days before, the conveniences that we take for granted now. So she was calling, and her mom was like, "Are you ready to come home?" And she was like, "Not yet. I'll call you back." And
She anticipated working to about 8:30
to
that
about
night.
8:30. Yeah, she said
Yeah.
about 8:30. So her mom was sitting on the couch waiting. She said she was
And
reading a
well,
book.
one more thing about that, she didn't say a person's name. So when she called home, she wanted to know had anyone called for her. So I
Right,
thought that
yeah.
was rather unusual because if it was a phone call that she had been anticipating, she would have named that person by name.
Not if she didn't want anybody to know she was waiting for that phone call.
That's true too. But at the end of the day, someone else would have received the phone call and ultimately found out who that other person was
Yeah,
anyway.
but I'm just saying, like, if you were like, I'm just saying you may not necessarily say, "Hey, I was waiting for a phone call from, Christopher. Let me know if he calls." You might just be like, "Did anybody call me?" And then if they say, "Oh yeah, Chris called," like, "Oh, okay," you know what I'm saying? Like, you may not want, especially with her brother. I'm telling you, as somebody who had a brother, you don't want your brother in your business like that. You just be like, "Did anybody call me?" And again, these are just small details, but it may or may not be important. You know what I mean?
And it may have not been important in that moment in time, but hindsight is 2020.
That's
And
true.
so given the outcome of this situation, some of those fine details come into play.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
her mother is anticipating another phone call from her at 8:30 to come pick her up from work. What happens?
Well, she actually fell asleep. So she fell asleep and so didn't realize that she never got the phone call until her husband came home that night. And she said her husband had a habit of just checking all the kids' rooms when he got home from work. And when he checked Clea's room, she was not there. He woke her up and
So what
said,
time was
"Where's
all
Clea?"
this?
I want to say they said it was about midnight. If I remember
Yeah,
correctly, I think it was about midnight. I think it was
yeah,
about
yeah.
midnight. And so, her mom, her mother had just slept through. So it wasn't until her husband woke her up that she realized, wait a minute, no, I
Clear's
never
not
did get a
home.
phone call.
Right.
Right. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, didn't they check with the brother to find out if the brother had went to get her or something like that? Didn't they check, or was it just, oh, she's not home yet?
She's not home yet because I guess it would have kind of been a moot point to even check with the brother to see if he had went to go get her because she wasn't home. So I think after this point, the mother gets up and realizes that Clea isn't home yet, and the first thing she does is call Dr. Uh, Amos's home to see is Clea still there, what happened. And on every account and research that I have come across regarding this case, all say that Dr. Amos picks up the phone on the first ring, which
Right.
I find it a little bit odd at after midnight, closer to 1 o'clock in the morning, that he picks the phone up on the first ring. And he goes on to let the mother know when she's not here. She left about 8:30. There's been several different accounts that says that the doctor assumed that the mother had came and picked her up. She got in the car with an unknown or unidentified individual. He can't describe the vehicle that she left in. And then in other accounts, it's been, well, I heard her leave. I heard the door close. I heard the
Right.
garage door
So,
go down.
right. So, couple of things. The first thing is, I think it's important to note that her mom called on his business line, not his personal phone.
Correct.
So that was even more like, well, why? Like, if my daughter left at 8:30, you're still working at midnight. And again, it's his office, and he can work however late he wants to. But that was something that just sort of hit her as odd that he picked up the phone on the first ring, like he was still in his office at midnight. So it wasn't his personal line. Whereas you might say, oh well, if it was his personal line, maybe he picked up the phone. The phone was right by the bed or something like that. But the other thing was at least from what I remember, he told two different stories. The story he told in the beginning was she got in the car. I couldn't make out the make and model of the car, and I couldn't tell who was driving. But then later on, he changed his story to I heard her leave. I just assumed because that's how she always gets home. You pick her up. So I just assumed somebody picked her up because so he told two separate stories.
So the doctor is not able to shed any other light as to why Clea is not home at 1 o'clock in the morning. He offers no other details as to anything out the ordinary that happened that night during her shift. He assumed that she's home. She left like she normally would. And that was pretty much the end of the night. He verifies her time card and says, oh, yeah, she left at
Yeah,
8:30.
he did check her time card and let them know. Yeah, she left at 8:30. Um, so Clea's mom is like, at that point, she's like, all right, she must be out. She must be out smelling herself a little bit. She, 18, and she done had her prom, and she thinks she grown. And I'm gonna just stay up and wait for her to get home. And I got some words for her when she walked in this door. And she said she stayed up all night waiting for her to come home, but she never did. Never came home.
And so there's not much that is spoken about during this time. Uh, there's some theories that they were under the impression that she may have been with this boy. So the next morning, there's some thought that she might have went straight to school. But given how the description of what she was last wearing, I wouldn't have expected her to go to school dressed like that. It just seems like she kind of had on some loungewear, just kind of, around the house clothes. She
Yeah.
wasn't really dressed.
And remember, she doesn't have ID. She doesn't have her wallet. Like,
no money or anything.
nothing.
So her and her brother both are attending the same high school, and they're under the impression that she just may have went to school, and that day the band class, she was a member of the band. The band class was going to another school. They were going to play at an elementary school. So when the rest of the seniors got back from that trip, Clea was not in tow with the rest of the class. At which time the younger brother, which is Willie Jr., calls home to inform the family that, hey, she's not at school. Now, there have been other accounts where I've heard where the next morning, around about 9 a.m., the family allegedly goes over to, he's identified as Scott Walker, which is the male friend who's not the boyfriend, and question him about her whereabouts. Did you spend any time with her the night before? Have you heard from her? Have you seen her? Did she come over here? And the male friend can't give any shed any light on where she's at. No, I haven't seen her, I haven't talked to her, and that's that. Now later on down the line, allegedly, this male friend is brought in to be questioned, and later on offered a polygraph that comes back inconclusive.
Right. And, we know now, like, I don't think anybody is under any illusions that a polygraph test is always, accurate. Inconclusive could be a whole lot of different reasons. And it could even be a
And it could be
situation.
poorly administrated.
Right. It could be so many different reasons. And, like me and you we were talking on offline, they may have asked the wrong questions. And, like, for example, they could say, well, do you know?
Or they may have asked personal questions that he did not want to answer.
Right. Or it could have just been the way the question was asked. Like, did you have plans to see Clea? And he may have said, no, when maybe they did, but he, again, at that point, maybe he didn't want to get in trouble. Maybe the parents didn't know. He could have,
And even in the
it
same
could have been
time, he
anything.
doesn't know
Yeah.
where she is. So in
Right.
his mind, in this moment in time, she's not missing. She's going to show up any day now.
Right.
So
It could be any
I don't
variety of
want to make
reasons
trouble
why.
for her as well.
Right.
Any
It could.
reasons why.
Right. And I find it, again, with all of the podcasts that I've listened to, and YouTube videos and articles and stuff like that, we only found his name in one place. So I find it interesting that even 27 years later, his identity has been so well protected, because even Clea's mother doesn't speak his name. And so I find that to be interesting. I don't, again, I'm not saying that there's anything nefarious. I just find it interesting that the family has been so protective of his name. That tells me that I feel like they really don't feel like he had anything to do with it. Because I think if they felt like that he was connected or in some way, I don't feel like they would
Their
be
focus would
worried
be
about.
more
Yeah, I don't think they
pointed
were
in his
worried about
direction.
protecting him if they felt like he had something to do with it. So the fact that they won't really say his name, and the fact that we didn't find his name in a lot of different places, it says something to me. Now, it might not say anything to anybody else, but that's how I would take that. Because I'm.
Ultimately, my gut feeling, everything that I've read about this case up until this point doesn't lead me to think that he's involved as well. However, I will say that I do believe that there's things that, you know, we all as teenagers growing up didn't want to share with our parents. There were parts of our lives that, you know, we didn't want our parents to be made aware of. So
Agreed.
whatever the nature the relationship between him and her, I think that there's a certain level of discretion. You know, it could be at the point that they were casually dating or, you know, trying to develop a relationship. He
Right,
was
flirting
a
or
few
something.
years older than her. It's reported that he was a few years older than her. So, you know, it's a younger girl, older guy type scenario. So I think a lot of times when people are brought in for questioning and they're to the extent where they're given a polygraph means that you feel like this person is being deceptive. You feel like this person is hiding from you. So there's a certain level of questioning. There's a certain way they're going to approach you and handle you when they're questioning you for a polygraph. It's more of an accusatory tone. It's more of a policing type situation where I don't feel like you're being completely honest with me. And as people of color, uh those situations don't always tend to be the best interest for us, especially when you're not represented by an attorney. I'm one who personally advocates for anyone who's being questioned by the authorities, whether you're innocent or guilty, needs to do it in the presence of an attorney, a trained professional, because sometimes wordplay is everything, and sometimes things can be manipulated, twisted, and turned around to make you become a person of interest. Sometimes we've seen it in so many other cases that we've been following over the years that people don't necessarily become persons of interest until they are led down that path to become that person of interest or a suspect.
Right. Answer the question the wrong way. Yeah, anything could, and
You
I've,
become tunnel vision at that point.
exactly. And the police, unfortunately, that they get their mindset that it's a certain person, and then they make everything fit instead of the opposite of looking for the information. But
But I am
anyways,
very curious as to how we get to the male friend. How does he become the first focal point and not the doctor? This is the last place that she was at.
right.
This was her job, her employer. So to me, this should have been the first stop. This should have been the first person brought in for questioning, polygraph. Let's dig into this a little bit more, because the last place that she was allegedly seen alive and well, we knew that she was at work. The mother dropped her off. We knew that she called from Dr. Amos's house home. So we knew that she was there. But what we can't confirm, and what anyone can't confirm, is
That she ever left.
that she ever left.
Right. I said that as well. Like I really wish I really wish I knew how we got to the friend, and certainly how we got to the friend before we got to the doctor. But anyway, let's get back to this. Let's get back to this. So by noon, when the brother called to let the mom know, listen, she's not at school, she wasn't on that field trip. She said that was when she first went and filed a police report, or attempted to file the police report, because at that point they had to wait 24 hours, and it hadn't been 24 hours yet. So she said she had to go back at 5 o'clock, because that was the last time she saw her daughter, was at 5 o'clock when she dropped her off, and then she filed the police report.
And even then, I don't feel like the authorities took the proper measures to go ahead and start launching an investigation. Seems like they didn't do any backtracking to her steps, even as far as back to school that day. Um, it seems like the doctor was casually approached and asked, could his home be searched? And 2 weeks later, we decide we want to search the doctor's home. 2 weeks later, we want to actually press redial on the business phone or the home office phone, to find out what the last number that was dialed. What evidentiary value did we think we were going to get 2 weeks later, when when a person has had an opportunity to get rid of any evidence that may be present?
Right. Well, you jumping ahead, but but yeah, all of that's correct. All of that is accurate, and also Dr. Amos actually left and went out of town the next day. So again, he leaves town, maybe taking stuff with him that might have been important. I mean, it could be anything, but that also was a hindrance as well, was that, that he was able to leave town. Well, I shouldn't say able to leave town because he wasn't actually a suspect, but that he left town. The police went to the school, but what was interesting was that they went to the school the next day, not so much to try to like interview her friends and so forth about where she might be, but to find out about her character. And the mother said that the police even admitted to her, well, if we had found out that she was a troublemaker, we wouldn't have even looked for her, because we just would have assumed she was just a runaway or something.
So here we are with what's going to be starting the victim blaming syndrome, is when something happens to someone, and instead of us investigating and letting the facts speak to the situation, we come up with assumptions, and we're automatically going to assume that she's probably ran off with a guy somewhere, she's probably a runaway child, she's
Right.
a belligerent child, and she was the opposite of all of that.
And I really want us to get away. And I mean, I guess I'm about to go on a tangent for a second. I don't, I understand that police resources are limited, but I really, really, really need police to get away from that mindset that every time a child is gone, that they automatically, they just out having a good time. Oh, they just stayed out past curfew and scared to come home. Oh, they're probably just a runaway. And I understand that there are times when all of that could be true. But if I'm a parent and I'm telling you, listen, my child didn't come home last night, does it matter if, maybe they were just out breaking curfew? They still could be hurt. Does it matter if, they were a troublemaker at school? That's still my child, and my child didn't come home. Like, I still don't see where that's a valid reason to say I'm not going to do my job. You know what I'm saying?
I absolutely agree. And no one knows a person better than people who spend them. Yes,
Yeah.
that people who spend the most time with a person and can know when something is uncharacteristic about a person's behavior. And this, from everything that we've learned about her, is very uncharacteristic of her. They were a very close-knit family. Her mother was pretty much responsible for all of her transportation to and from her events.
Right.
She had so much that was going for her in her favor, that it was just very odd that they would assume that she's just ran away
Right. Assume
from
the
life.
worst. Yeah.
Yeah.
Assume the worst. And so the mom said that basically at that point, they kind of, the police didn't really do anything. They created flyers. She said that her and people from church, they created a search group, and they started searching in the woods that were across the street from the doctor's home. And again, she didn't say because they suspected that the doctor did anything, but they were just like, that's just weird, because again,
That's the
that was the last
vicinity.
place.
Yes,
Right,
that's
that's
the
the last
vicinity.
place they
Yeah.
saw her. So, that's where they had to go and look. Um for whatever reason, it, like you said earlier, it took them 2 weeks to get into the doctor's home. And at that point, I don't know what they thought they were going to find. Like, let's just
Well, at that
assume.
point, they didn't even do diligence to be prepared to go search the doctor's home, because even though the family organized search parties, the police didn't organize a
Right,
search
the police
effort.
didn't do anything. Yeah.
Even
Right.
when they went to the school to investigate her character, they didn't even bother investigating her belongings. They didn't even look through her
Right. They didn't even
belongings.
look in her
The
locker.
school
Yeah.
had to call them and ask them, would they like to retrieve the things from her locker?
Right.
And to this day, the family doesn't even know what the contents were in the locker.
Right.
So
The
that,
police.
that
Right. The
that's
police cleaned out her
that's
locker. Yeah.
that's just that's the first issue that I have.
Well, that
Second
ain't the
issue,
first, but.
with the authorities. The second issue that I have is that they approached Dr. Amos and they kind of, it seems as though they just kind of ask him, "Hey, Dr. Amos, can you mind if we just look around a little bit? You know, she was here the last place. This is where she was at. You know, can we just kind of look around instead of going with a warrant in hand and thoroughly searching and being able to take the time to actually do a comprehensive search versus, you know, a search that is granted by permission can end at any time."
Right.
And so it said that the doctor did not allow them to stay long to perform a search.
Right. And again, I'm nobody's law enforcement. I didn't go to, the academy, and I certainly didn't go to law school. But it seems to me that if the last time somebody was seen was at my home, I said they left, but nobody can prove that they left. It seems to me like the police could have been a little more proactive in trying to get, even if it was a limited search warrant, even if it was just limited to his office where they know that she was working. I mean, it just seems to me like the police could have been a little more proactive or a little more forceful in getting in that home.
At this point, they need to be a little bit more forceful for answers, because according to Mr. Hall, it's allegedly said that the doctor immediately started exhibiting strange behavior after her disappearance. There's been accounts where I've read and heard that he was witness taking flyers down, and I've also heard where he's paid people to take her flyers
down. Yes. Which is really interesting, because because again, let's look at that. At the very least, even if, and again, everything is alleged, this is just our opinion. Even if he didn't have anything to do with it, let's say she did leave his house that night and got into a car or whatever. This is a young lady that worked for you for a year. This is somebody who you got to know. Even if y'all just had casual conversation, why wouldn't you want the family to find her? Why would you take the flyers down?
And why wouldn't you be a focal part of that?
Right. And the family said he never.
Participant.
The family said he never.
In getting the answers, in helping the family receive the answers. Not only is this an employee of yours, but to even clear your own name. You know, I would think that you would be an active participant in wanting to help uncover what happened to this young lady. Especially in light of the fact that she was a model student. She was, from all accounts, a very well organized, very well mature 18-year-old. So I would have to think that she probably did a very good job on your job. You know, this is a person that worked in your home for over a year.
Right.
And you show little to no interest in wanting to find out the truth. What happened to her? I would feel terrible. I would be riddled with guilt every night, knowing that the last place that she was known to be at would be my home.
Was that my house? Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I would be bending over backwards to help the family. But again, that's us. So that was 2 weeks later. And basically, other than the friend / boyfriend being questioned by the police and
there are no other persons of interest or
nobody else, nobody else. The only other thing that came up was the doctor's wife or ex. At that point they were no longer married, but at that point she did let the police know and she talked to the parents that he was abusive and he was volatile. And she, basically
controlling,
controlling, and that she basically had to escape out of the house by throwing, hot water on him. But her accounts were not taken seriously because at the time they were in the process of a custody battle. And so they were like, okay, she's just a scorned woman, and we can't really take anything that she says, with any type of validity. So there's that.
Allegedly, it's also said that during this divorce proceeding between the doctor and the wife, the ex-wife, that the doctor was refusing the divorce and fighting the divorce on all accounts. In other words, to remain married to the wife. And of course, we all know that there is spousal protection between spousals privilege. When it comes to a man and a wife. Right. And so the doctor was pretty much very forceful in fighting or contesting the divorce. It's another 12 years before we get another break in the case. It's March the 29th, 2012.
Mm-hmm.
Two construction workers finally decide to go forward to the authorities, and it's alluded that they performed work for Dr. Amos's home. I don't know if this is renovations to the office, because I've read so many different accounts, but I'm under the impression that the home office was the garage and it had been converted into a home office.
I think so as well. Yeah.
Well, it's said that these two construction workers had performed work on Dr. Amos's home around the time that Cle'a went missing.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever those construction workers came forth and told the authorities didn't actually gave them the ability to have probable cause to go get a official search warrant to search the doctor's home. What happens?
Well, first of all, they never notify the parents to say, "Hey, we got a break in this case."
They find out through the media.
Yeah. Well, Clea's mom said somebody called her while she was at work, and she went around there, but they might have found out because, and she said when she got around there, it was like 30, 30, people, it was like police officers everywhere and the crime lab and everything. And the police officers came out after hours and hours and hours, came out with bags and bags of
It said that it
potential
was 4
evidence.
bags of evidence that was removed from the doctor's home.
Right.
12 years later.
Mm-hmm. And now here's where it gets crazy all over again. So this whole case has been crazy anyway, but here's where it gets crazy again. So the crime lab van parked away from the house because I've heard different accounts. One account I heard was that the crime lab lady said that she was scared for her life, which I have no idea why she would be afraid for her life. I heard
Especially
that
in the presence of authorities.
right. Like I have no idea why she would be afraid for her life, but whatever. I heard that it was just so much traffic, it was just so much, so many people around that they just kind of parked away, just different things. So
I do believe that, because from what I understand, there was a lot of people from the neighborhood and the family and friends and things had congregated. And essentially they were in the way.
mm-hmm.
And so what's said to have happened was that the authorities, or this one particular detective, not the authorities, it's this one particular detective, decided to take the bags of evidence, and from what I understand, they were just regular garbage bags of evidence, and put into the trunk of his car.
Right.
His rationality with that was that he wanted to preserve or secure the evidence and not have to handle those many bags through a crowd of spectators. So that was his way of preserving the evidence.
Right. The problem was the next day, or no, not the next day, because that was a Friday. So he kept it in his truck. I mean, in the trunk of his car the whole weekend. That Monday, he took the evidence to the crime locker, I guess, or the place,
A drop point.
Yeah, a drop off point. And that is where the evidence sat for 40 days. Now, there was some sort of miscommunication between the police officer and the woman at the crime lab, where he dropped it off and he assumed that she knew it was there. She never knew it was there. But what I find to be very interesting is that the parents were checking back with the police on a weekly basis, and they kept telling her, "Oh, well, we're waiting. They're still processing." When in actuality, nobody was processing anything because it was sitting in bags in this drop off point. So are we
Beyond
lying?
that,
Are we miscommunicating? Like, what's going on?
well, it's said that this is not proper protocol for the chain of custody of the evidence. What was supposed to have happened was that detective should have made contact with someone from the crime lab to hand off that evidence. It should have been logged in. It should have been documented what was removed, and it should have been stored properly to prevent cross contamination. So now there is a speculation that the evidence could have been cross contaminated. So it gets to the crime lab for processing, and of course, it's nothing of evidentiary value that's found in these 4 bags of evidence, but yet there was enough to remove 4 bags of evidence, but we found nothing.
Well, unfortunately, a couple of things, because even if it was a smoking gun, the sad thing is that even if what they took out of that house was a smoking gun, they could have found Clea's DNA at that point. And guess what? There would have been nothing that they could do with it, because the chain of command had been so thoroughly fumbled that when I say nothing they could do with it, you know what I mean? Like, they would have had to come up with something outside evidence that they collected. They would have had to find something that would link them back in order for them to be able to even bring that evidence in. So they really did a really bad job. I don't even know if their intent was to even try hard. You know what I mean?
It definitely seemed like it was a lack of interest in finding a resolution. To me, it almost feels as if they were pandering or pacifying or just going through the motions for the family.
Right.
Because the family is, I feel like the family is involved, but I don't think that the family is aggressive as we've seen other families with missing persons and
That's
murders.
true. That's true.
I
And I
think the
know that
family, I think that the family, out of respect for the authorities, that they are doing their job and they're doing the best that they can do to find a solution or an answer. I think the family really did rely upon the authorities to. They put their hope into the authorities that they would eventually solve the case.
Right.
And
And I did one of the interviews that I saw with the mom. She said that they did actually go to the state police because they felt like the
they had
local police
exhausted.
were
Yeah.
just in over their heads, and they just, they did. And the state police felt like that the local police could handle it and sort of kicked it back. So, but again, like you said, we've seen other cases where the FBI gets involved and like other agencies do get involved. And so again, when I was taking my notes for the podcast, one of the notes I wrote was, "Is this incompetence or is this racism?" And I mean, it might be the elephant in the room, but it's a conversation that has to be had. Had this been a young white girl, would the conversation be different? Would the effort have been different? Especially something as simple as, "Hey, you were the last person to see her alive. Can we get in your house and search?" Like, I just, I don't know. And I don't know these people, so I don't want to paint them with a label. But that was something I wrote in my notes. Like, is this, because at the very least, it's incompetent. Like, it's just incompetent.
Well, I think I don't necessarily want to go as far as to say misconduct. Maybe a little bit of incompetence, a little bit, maybe a little bit of just uh, following protocol. I think there was a lot of protocol that wasn't followed, and I think there was just a lot of disinterest in the case. However, another thing that I can't seem to wrap my head around is that uh, there has been accounts made regarding the doctor, that the doctor was known around town to have a less than stellar reputation about himself.
Right.
We spoke to earlier of him being frugal. There's also been some allegedly some accusations regarding the doctor and misappropriation of some of those grant funds that he was getting. Um, I I do believe the answers lies with the doctor, and I don't know how much time we necessarily have left with the doctor, if the doctor is even still alive at this point. I believe at the time she disappeared, she was 43, and so he's probably in his 70s at this point.
Yeah.
One of the things that has always been said is that the doctor has been very um adamant about not allowing anyone into the home, the
Right.
family,
Right.
which
Right.
again, I find that very bizarre behavior. And I can understand a little bit of it to a certain degree regarding the male friend and the doctor being very quiet publicly about this case, because I'm sure they get a lot of unwanted attention. I'm sure they
Mm-hmm.
get a lot of accusatory, derogatory, threatening comments in regards to them and their involvement with Clea. But at the same time, that would be motivation for them to help want to resolve the case, bring justice, and clearing their names.
You would think. You
You
would
would
think
think.
so. You would think. And I know that also when we talk about the doctor and his behavior, and again, it's always easy to be on the outside looking in, but it seems to me like if like I wouldn't want people to think that I had anything to do with this young girl's disappearance. So I would do everything in my power to cooperate. Like, you want to come through my house, come through the house. Like, I mean, short of tearing my house up, like, no. But if you want to come look, come look. Come see what you need to see. I'm letting the parents know everything. That I can let them know. And the other thing I read somewhere too was that one of the police officers, n- when they brought up the doctor's name, the police officer was like, "Oh yeah, he's a crook." And they had to kind of go back and make that, that officer had to actually apologize to the doctor, and they had to take that like out of the record that he had said that. So again, I feel like Dr. Amos didn't have the best reputation. That doesn't mean that, he's
And given
guilty,
his
but
behavior in regards to the case, I, I would have to agree. I would have to probably a creep, because I mean, here we are. We have a very bright and accomplished and uh, decent young lady, and his lack of involvement uh, in wanting to know what happened to her and helping bring the family some comfort and closure. It just it totally mystifies me. I mean,
so
it,
so let's so let's switch gears for a second. Let me ask you a question. Then, and this is all our opinion. This is not no factual. This is just us. What do you think happened? Let's assume for a minute that Clea never left that house. Let's just go ahead and go down that road. What do you think happened?
okay. So this is my personal opinion.
Right?
Um, well, first of all, let me just say this before I go into my opinion. We see a lot of treatment of women who have less than stellar backgrounds, women who are uh, maybe who work in adult entertainment. When things like that happen to them, where they turn up murdered and missing, usually the authorities have they're not so focused on wanting to solve the case because of the type of woman that they are. And I get that feeling that Clea is being handled that way. If this was a young white lady, I feel like there would be way more emphasis and resources put on wanting to solve the case. And this really frustrates me to see that people of color just are not given the same um, equal justice, whether it's with the prosecution of crimes, being accused of crimes, being murdered in the streets. It just all that ties into typecasting. Switching gears, my theory on what happened that night. I do believe everything that the ex-wife has said about the doctor in her interviews with the press. Doubling back just real quick, when the family, particularly Laurel, Clea's mother, met with the ex-wife, she had hired a photographer to take pictures of her while she was speaking with the family, which I thought that was very bizarre behavior. It went on to say that the reason why she did that was because she felt like the doctor was going to retaliate against her for speaking with the family, and what she would tell the family. So I feel like there's secrets there with the wife as well.
Right.
Going back to what happened that night, I do believe Clea showed up as normal. It was a normal night for her to be at work. I feel like that phone call that she made at home at 8 o'clock, there was a reason for that call. That's just too close in time to call at 8 o'clock and then say, I'll call back at 8:30, when she could have just simply said, come pick me up at 8:30 when you had her on the phone at 8 o'clock. It just, to me, doesn't make sense to have two phone calls back to back. Well, 8 o'clock is when the mother normally is expected to come and get you, but I'm working till 8:30 tonight, as if she was stalling out for something.
Now that's true. That is true. I never thought of it like that. That she could have just as easily as said, "Call me back at 8:30." Just be here at 8:30.
Yeah, be here at 8:30. I'll be ready.
Yeah,
I
didn't think about that. That's true. I didn't think about that.
I think specifically she was seeking a phone call, or expecting, or had been expecting a phone call. Because keep in mind, if she had went to work, it sounds like if she worked part-time, we're talking about maybe a 4-hour shift. So had she went to work at 3 o'clock, she would have been home by 6, meaning that this phone call that she was anticipating, because remember, she wanted to go to work earlier that day for a reason. She would have been home to receive the call that she would have expecting. So not having the time between the time her mom went to go try to drop her off work the first time, and then arriving back home to wait for her to go back to work, she didn't have time to rearrange what she may have previously already had planned. So the inquiry about the phone call is, okay, she was expecting a phone call from someone. Now, what that phone call was about, I have no theories on that. Okay, so in turn, she now has to call said person that she's expecting that phone call from Dr. Amos's home. If Dr. Amos is of the character that he's described as jealous, controlling, abusive, all these things that the ex-wife has accused him of, I would think that Dr. Amos would have an issue with Cle'a being on the phone with someone else while she's at his job, particularly a male. So if this interest that Cle'a has in this male friend was a little more than platonic, and I'm not saying that they were sexually or intimately involved or anything like that, but she could have very easily had a crush on the young man. There could have been, progressing to a dating relationship. We would never known that. I think that there was some type of confrontation between Dr. Amos and Cle'a. And I think that somewhere within the exchange of a confrontation, that Cle'a may have announced her plans on not returning to continue to work for him. There may be things that Cle'a maybe unwillingly participated in, bear witness to, overheard, witnessing in his paperwork, in his business dealings, that he may felt jeopardize his career or jeopardize whatever he had going on with these grants.
Right.
And I do believe that he murdered her that night. I do believe that the wife is fully aware of what happened, and from fear of what he would do to her, or fear of her being prosecuted as an accessory or involved in a crime, she helped him cover this crime. I do believe that her remains is somewhere on his property. That's my theory.
So I agree. I don't think Clea ever left that home. What I don't know is why. I think it was a crime of passion. I think that something happened that night. Do I think that Clea might have been up to something, and maybe she was trying to, plan a little rendezvous or something? Maybe, perhaps, definitely what you said, is curious, but I don't know if it had anything nefarious as far as maybe, anything that the doctor liked, for lack of a better word, was attracted to or liked her. And maybe, like you said, he caught her on the phone with a boy or flirting with a boy and he wasn't cool with it. I don't know if it was something business wise. She was going to leave, and, she was leaving for her internship in a few weeks. And maybe, he asked her to do something she wasn't comfortable with, and she finally confronted him and an argument ensued. But what I absolutely believe is that whatever happened was a spur of the moment. I don't think it was planned. I don't think anything was premeditated, because I think it would have been planned a lot better if he had planned that was going to be her last night there. I felt like there would have been, I just felt like that he could have made some better arrangements for some things. But I think it was a crime of passion, and they did something with the body. I think the wife knows. Um, and I do think that that's what, like, when, like you said, those photographs and everything, um, I think she knows exactly what happened to Clea. And for whatever reason, I don't know if because she was complicit and she's worried about maybe, going to jail as well. I don't know, but I do think she knows what happened. Um, and I think that's part of the reason why that doctor he has not moved out of that house. Like,
and will not let anyone else in that
it will
house. But
not,
there's an
right.
important detail that we left out in the
Okay.
story, and it's the coworker. It's very rarely, as you can see, we overlooked it in our account of the story. But there has been several different accounts of the story that's being told that her friend or acquaintance, Erica, the coworker, was also working that night and offered Clea a ride home. She refused the ride and told her that she would just walk home,
Mm-hmm.
which the family has an issue with this because Clea would never have walked home by herself. The brother always comes and walks her home,
Right.
or the mother comes and get her. If she had just gotten off the phone with her mom and told her mom that she would call back at 8:30 when she was ready to be picked up, 10 minutes down the road, but then Erica offers to give her a ride home. They're apparently getting off work at the same time. Whatever would have happened to her had to happen before 8:30 or right after that window of 8 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
It would have had to happen in that moment because 30 minutes from now my mom's coming to get me. So
Right.
that's so part of me kind of the timeline doesn't give the doctor an opportunity to murder her and get rid of her in 30 minutes
Yeah.
because she would not have been allowed to call home at 8 o'clock. Now, it would have been one thing that if the family would have dropped her off, the mother would have dropped her off at 4 o'clock and they never heard from her anymore that evening. But the fact that she called at 8 o'clock means that she was alive and well from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m.
Right.
After 8 p.m., we lose that timeline. We lose the time stamping because the mother then falls asleep in 30 minutes. So we don't
Right.
know, did she actually leave the home in 30 minutes and was accosted on her way home, abducted, snatched, or did she ever make it out of the doctor's house? The doctor would not have known that the mother was not going to arrive at 8:30 to pick her up. The doctor did not know that she was going to fall asleep till midnight. So what could have happened in such a short period of time to her that 27 years from now we don't have an answer to? With her being 10 minutes down the road, 10 minutes down the road is in my mind, and I don't know what the neighborhood looked at. I haven't pulled it up on Google Maps or anything like that, but 10 minutes down the road seems like our distance to my house. It's our view.
Right.
what could have happened in such a short distance between her home and the doctor's home in such a short window of time?
Right. And that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't, and again, I've listened to so much in a short period of time that stuff gets blurred. But one of the podcasts that I listened to, there was a question about Erica's version of the story as far as her timeline. Like, Erica was there that night, but there was some questioning of how late she was there versus how late. And so that timeline, again, I don't, it was just, and then like you said, the family questioned what Erica said as well, because like you said, she would not have. And the reality is, let's just assume for a minute it was a regular night and everything was everything. Why wouldn't she accept a ride from Erica? It would keep her mother from having to come out the house at night. If she was ready to leave when Erica was ready to leave, why wouldn't she just take the ride from Erica? You
Which
know what I
takes me
mean?
back to my theory of her having uh previously arranged plans that she didn't want others involved in. She didn't want Erica to know that she had other arrangements. Sometimes, we'll tell someone something just to get them out of our business,
True.
to brush them off.
True.
Nah, don't worry about it. I'm walking home, but really I have other plans. So that's just the biggest part of this mystery is what could have happened to her in proximity of her own home that no one else bear witness to, that no one else heard anything, seen anything, saw anything suspicious, no evidence of anything left behind, not a shoe, not signs of a struggle, or
Well,
anything
I mean,
like
he
that.
had 2 whole weeks to get rid of anything. And again, remember, he went out of town,
But
so
there's
he
a
could have
big
packed a
difference
suitcase full of
between
all of her
two
stuff. And
weeks. There's a big difference between the 2 weeks that he had after she disappeared and the night she disappeared. The night she disappeared, he didn't have such a large window of time
but nobody came
to
in the house.
to
So,
but how would he have known that no one would? How would he have known that no one would have showed up that night looking for her? He didn't know that they wasn't going to show up that night looking for her. He didn't know that a phone call. Why do you think that he answered the phone on the first ring? He had been
that's what I was gonna say. That's
anticipating.
why. That's why he was still up at midnight. He was, cleaning up whatever. I mean, again, I'm not trying to be crass about it, but he was
I guess
taking
because
care
I've
of what
never
needed to be
murdered
taken
someone
care of.
before, I don't know how long it takes to murder someone. It just seems like such a small window of time between 8 o'clock and 8:30 when she would be calling for a ride, or a ride would have been someone would have been arriving to
Right,
take
but
her.
that's why I think whatever happened after she made that phone call. I don't know. I don't know. It's weird. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I hear your point. Your point is valid. Why wouldn't she just tell her mother, "Hey, just be here at 8:30"? I don't know. It's weird. It's weird. But I don't know. That's why I started off by saying I don't know the rest of it. I just don't think that young lady ever left that house. I don't know. I don't think she ever left that house.
I think it's pretty safe to say that the doctor is involved. At the very least, his behavior and his interest
It's
in
suspicious.
is suspicious at best. Uh, Definitely a suspect. I'm very curious as to why the doctor hasn't been given a polygraph. That they seen that the boyfriend, and this is another reason why I kind of want to lean towards the male friend aspect a little bit, because if she did have plans that no one else knew about, then he's a person that had access to her, and she could have very easily called the boyfriend and told the boyfriend to come and get her instead.
And I'm curious. I'm curious as to who said what, whether it was the doctor, whether it was the parents, whether it was Erica. Who
Someone put
said
emphasis on
something?
the boyfriend, exactly.
Right. Who said something that made the police even, because we have no, there is no proof that, I mean, other than the doctor saying somebody picked her up and I couldn't tell you. But then he came back later and said that he heard her leave, he never saw her leave. But what pointed the police to the point where they gave this young man a polygraph test.
And not the
They didn't
doctor.
just talk to him and say,
Well, he
"Oh, okay,
refused.
cool."
The doctor refused
Well,
the
the doctor
polygraph.
refused to do it. Yeah, he would schedule it and then cancel it, schedule it and then cancel it. He was playing games. But it seems to me like they had more reason to be to put pressure on a doctor than they had to put pressure on this young man who nobody could even prove whether he was even in the neighborhood. Like what the fact that they put, like I said, they gave him a polygraph. I just found it to be very interesting that how did they even go there? Like who said anything that even pointed them in that direction? You know what I'm saying? I
Where is
just
the court order for the phone records? Where is the court order for the phone records for the doctor's phone? There's just so many things that weren't thoroughly investigated. And then some of it could, but I don't know if this is an active, ongoing investigation. I don't know if it's considered closed.
It's not considered closed. It's just probably considered inactive. It's a cold case.
It's a
So it's
cold
probably
case.
considered inactive. But no, it's I don't well, I'm not gonna say it's not closed. I don't think it's closed. Let me the last interview I saw with the mom, and that was I think it was about a year ago. She said that it's not closed, it's just inactive. But again, anything could have happened. But
Well, I
something
say
we
all that to
found
say that
before we
there
went.
could be parts of the case that aren't public knowledge.
Well,
That
that's
you
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Finish up.
No, go ahead.
Finish that. No, I didn't mean. I didn't mean to cut you off. Um, but so two things to what you just said. One is, um, when that report came back from the evidence they took out, even though it had been sitting, in the locker for 40 days, the police just came back to the family and was like, "Oh yeah, there's no new evidence." I want to see the report. Like the family said they never saw the report. They never saw anything. The family said to this day they don't even know what was in their daughter's locker because the police took it and never gave it back, never gave them an inventory, never told them, well, it was a hairbrush, it was her books, it was her jacket. Like they have no idea what evidence the police actually have. And, again, I'm not second guessing because I can't even put myself in their shoes. But it just seems like, I wonder why they never retained their own attorney to sort of advocate for them, because it seems like the police is really not trying to be proactive in helping the family at least come to terms with the situation. It seems to me like they would be open to say, listen, here's what we collected, and the report came back that there was nothing there. Like they don't even know what they took out of the house. Now the rumor is they took concrete and stuff like that, but they don't know anything. And that just seems to me to add insult to injury. You know what I mean?
It's an oddity. It's an oddity at best. And I don't know if that's because the persons that were handling all that was a little bit inept, or not properly trained, not following procedures or protocols. It's inept at best. And a very strange happening for a case like this, because you would think that there would be a lot of scrutiny on a young college student, well, a young high school student disappearing from their job. You would think there would be some attention from the political forces of that town to want to have a resolution for that case. The
Right.
closest that I've seen where the mother has kind of reached out for some assistance, and that's been through City Hall, through the City Council. Um,
Hmm.
I don't know if there's been any activists that have been involved in pressuring law enforcement to solve the case. I know there has been a lot of pressure that's been put on the police chief at the time. Her name was Brenda Davis. They put a lot of emphasis and focus on how she was managing uh, her resources for this case, and the lack of uh, knowledge and experience and training, I think, is what forced them to go to the state police, was because I don't think that they were equipped to investigate a case like this, because it was so many twists and turns, and they probably didn't have the manpower or the resources or technology for that matter to get some of these answers that we can get now with GPS tracking and DNA and things like that. In
You
1994,
good
a
with the
lot of that was
GPS
in this
stuff.
infant stages of being created. So
Well, we
regardless
did
of who's
see.
involved and responsible for it, it's just a terrible tragedy
Yeah.
that a bright young lady,
Right.
a beautiful, bright young lady, doesn't have an answer.
Right. One last thing. We did see right before we went live, before we recorded this, you did find an article where there was some sort of protest recently, right? Wasn't it like a month ago or something like that?
Last year.
Where it was last year. I apologize. I thought it was more recent than that. But there was a protest where people, because of podcasts and, so many people are talking about this in the true crime community, there was a protest that was trying to put pressure on the police chief and on the police department down there based on that evidence that was collected. Like, they want to know what it was based on, what they found, like what exactly it was. So it does seem like people, podcasts like this and other podcasts that we've listened to have sort of maybe
But
reawakened some things.
I think there's been several attempts at that over the years, but a lack of a better term, a little too late for that.
Well, yeah.
I think what this is more so is honoring her, is kind of like a memorial, a candlelight vigil type thing, just keeping her name alive and the memory of her. I'm not gonna say it's too little too late to solve this case, because we've seen cases that much older than this solved. So it's cold, but I think it's solvable, and I think it lies with the doctor. Whether he's directly responsible for her disappearance, he knows more of what happened about that night than he's speaking to.
And I think the wife does as well.
So, like I said, this is something that we're going to start doing, particularly centered around, for the first part, will be focused on persons of color, murders and disappearances, to kind of help these families get some justice and shed some light to what's happening to our people, and helping our people get some comfort and justice in their grief, and helping to prosecute those who are responsible for harming our people. If anyone knows anything that could help resolve this case, solve it, give this family some closure, and most of all, let's give Cle'a some peace, wherever she may be, can rest in peace. I'm sorry to say, but it's in my opinion that she's no longer with us.
Yeah.
And we need to find out why she's no longer with us, who's responsible for that. So again, do the right thing. If anyone who knows about this has any information that can help give his family some comfort, go to your local authorities. There's so many ways to report tips and things anonymously with anonymity, where you don't have to come forward, but it's 27 years later, and someone needs to get their conscience clear. I would hope that whatever happens with the doctor, we end up with some answers before long. And given his suspicious behavior, no matter how I twist and turn my theory, it ultimately all leads me back to him because of what he's done.
All roads lead to the doctor in my mind as well.
All right. Well, anything else?
Nope, that's it. That's all.
That was a good case.
We're going to try to do this on a regular basis, so definitely, join us again.
Yep, we'll be here. As always, you can reach us on our social media. You can find me at RETROCG
on Instagram. You can find me on YouTube at Really B as in Boy TV. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at ReallyBTV _ on YouTube.
Thank y'all for listening to our podcast, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Peace.
This program is brought to you by TSF Entertainment Podcast.